So good morning all of you. Today we'll study about a chapter on molecular biology, that is proof of DNA as genetic material. Under this we will study about the characteristics of genetic material, then Griffith and Avery experiment in proving DNA as a genetic material, then last one is the Hersey and Chase experiment, which again proves that DNA is the genetic material. Now let us come to the first one. What are the characteristics of a genetic material? The genetic material should possess following characteristics. What are those? First one is amount of genetic material should remain constant in all cells of an organism. That means in an organism, the genetic material must remain constant in all cells. Okay, the number must remain constant in all cells. Second, genetic material must be structurally and chemically, it must be stable. Then it must be able to store all biological information. Its job is to store the biological information. Then it must be able to undergo mutation so that genetic variability can be achieved. You know mutation. Then last one is it must be able to replicate itself and get transmitted to next generation. Replicate means it must be able to produce an exact copy of itself, and it must be able to get transmitted to the next generation. So the characters can be transferred from one generation to another generation. If something is possessing these characteristics, then we can call it as genetic material. Now let us know that how DNA was proved as the genetic material. So various experiments were done. First one was done by Griffith in 1928, which was again confirmed by Avery 1944. Then another one was done by your Hersey and Chase. Okay, first let us come to Griffith's experiment. As far as Griffith is concerned, Frederick Griffith, who was a medical officer in British Health Department in 1928, was doing experiments on pneumonia causing bacterium. Pneumonia causing bacterium known as Streptococcus pneumoniae or Diplococcus pneumoniae, otherwise known as pneumococcus. He found that this pneumococcus occurs in three forms. What were those? Those were type 1, type 2 and type 3. Okay, pneumococcus occurs in three forms: type 1, type 2, type 3, and all of these exist in both smooth as well as rough colonies. Now as far as what are those smooth colonies and rough colonies? Actually, the smooth colonies were covered with gelatinous capsule. Okay, the smooth colonies were covered with gelatinous capsule, which actually protects them from defense mechanism of the host. Okay, that is the immunity of the host, defense mechanism of the host. The bacterium gets protected or gets protection from the defense mechanism of the host due to presence of the gelatinous capsule around it. Okay, as a result of which these bacteria having smooth colonies, or which were capable of forming smooth colonies, were able to cause diseases, and these are called as the virulent or pathogenic type. Got it? So the bacteria which formed smooth colonies were actually the pathogenic type because they were able to cause diseases. Got it? Then second one was the rough colonies, that is they were without any capsule, and as a result of which they were being able to be acted upon by the defense mechanism of the host. There was nothing else to protect them, so they do not cause any disease. So these are called avirulent type or non-pathogenic type. Okay. So what do you know about pneumococcus? That pneumococcus occurs in three forms, are found in three forms: type 1, type 2 and type 3, and all of these three forms they exist in two types. What are those? Smooth colonies and rough colonies. As far as smooth colonies are concerned, there is presence of a gelatinous capsule around it which protect it from the defense mechanism of the host, as a result of which the bacteria with smooth colonies were able to cause disease. But as far as rough colonies are concerned, there were no capsule. As there were no capsule, so they were easily be acted upon by the defense mechanism host. They were attacked by the defense mechanism host, and hence they are not able to cause any disease. And these are known as the avirulent or non-pathogenic type. S type are virulent or pathogenic type, and R type are avirulent or non-pathogenic type. Okay. So what was the experiment? Actually, Griffith, for his experiment, took a mouse, then S3 type and R2 type of bacteria. Okay. For his experiment, he took three things: a mouse, S3 type and R2 type of bacteria. First, he injected the bacterium into the mouse in the following ways. Okay. First, he injected S3 type of bacteria into the mouse. Then he found that the result was that mouse died. When he injected S3 type into the mouse died. Then again in the second experiment, he injected the R2 type into the mouse, but the mouse survived, which is quite evident from the fact that S type of bacteria had gelatinous covering, which was able to protect itself from the defense mechanism of the mouse. So it was able to cause disease in mouse. As a result, the mouse died. But as far as R type is concerned, the second type, it had rough colonies without any capsule. So it was acted upon by it was being killed by the defense mechanism of the host. So there was no disease and thus the mouse survived. Then in the third experiment, he injected heat-killed S3 type into the mouse. The mouse survived. Heat-killed S3 type into the mouse and the mouse survived. Then the fourth experiment, which is very interesting one, he injected heat-killed S3 type and R2 type into the mouse. Okay. Heat-killed S3 type along with R2 type, he injected it into the mouse and surprisingly the mouse died. It should have survived, because from the above two experiments we found that when he was injecting R2 type into the mouse was able to survive. Again, when he was injecting heat-killed S3 type into the mouse was also surviving. But when he combined heat-killed S3 type and R2 type and injected it into the mouse, then the mouse died. Okay. Then your culture was extracted from the dead mouse and it was found that both R2 and live S3 type were present. We injected heat-killed S3 and R2, but what did we find from the culture extracts of the dead mouse? We found both R2 as well as live S3. Okay. So from it he concluded that the dead S3 type, okay, the dead S3 type has provided something to the R2 type. Dead S3 type has provided something to the R2 type. Got it? Which resulted in the formation or transformation of R2 type into S3 type or R type into S type. Okay. That means from it he concluded that the dead S3 type must have provided something to the R2 type, which resulted in the transformation of R type to S type. This something was referred to as transforming principle. Got it? This something was referred to as transforming principle, but he couldn't describe what this transforming principle was. Okay? He couldn't describe what this transforming principle was, and it was later explained by the next experiment done by Avery, MacLeod and McCarthy. Okay. Now let us come to the next one. Before Avery performed his experiment along with his associates Colin MacLeod and Maclean McCarthy in 1944. Actually, Oswald Avery and his co-workers MacLeod and Maclean McCarthy of Rockefeller Institute of USA performed this experiment. Okay, where instead of taking the whole organism which Mr. Griffith had taken, here these people didn't take the whole organism, rather they broke the bacterial cells and took the DNA isolated from heat-killed S3 type, okay, isolated from heat-killed S3 type of bacteria, and this DNA extract was used along with the combinations of different enzymes to transform R2 type bacteria. Okay. Now, how the experiment was done? Okay. In the previous experiment, the entire bacterium was getting injected, but here what these people did, They first extracted the DNA from the heat killed S3 type. Okay, DNA isolated from the heat killed S3 type, and this DNA extract was used along with combinations of different enzymes to transform R2 type bacteria. Okay, now the experiment was like this. First, he inoculated R2 type, then he found that R2 colonies were there in the petri dish where inoculation was done. R type of colonies or R2 type colonies were there in the petri dish. Then he got the DNA extracts of heat killed S type. Okay. Then he again cultured it. There were no colonies, heat killed S3 type. There were no colonies in the petri dish. Then in the third experiment, he took R2 type and DNA extracts of the heat killed S3 type, and no enzyme was given to it. Then he found in the petri dish all the colonies were S3 type. Okay. That means R has been converted to S. Again in the fourth experiment, he took R2 type, DNA extracts of heat killed S3 type, and an enzyme RNase was given. He again found S type of colonies in the petri dish. In the fifth experiment, he took again R2, DNA extracts of heat killed S3 type, and an enzyme DNase was given. Surprisingly, he found no colonies out there. Okay, remember, when DNase was given, there were no colonies. Then in the sixth experiment, he took R2 type, DNA extracts of heat killed S3 type, then enzyme protease was given. The petri dish had S type colonies. Okay, so what he did, actually they concluded that the protease and RNase treatment did not affect the transformation of R type to S type. Got it? But DNase treatment resulted no colonies because there were degradation of DNA by DNase enzyme. Okay? So it clearly proved that the transforming principle was DNA, because as DNA was being broken down by the presence of DNase, no colonies were formed. DNA was hydrolyzing the DNA extracts, so no colonies were found. Got it? So this clearly proved that the transforming principle was nothing but DNA. Got it? Okay, as far as this experiment is concerned, the Griffith experiment followed by Avery's experiment clearly proved that DNA is actually a genetic material. It had all the characters which qualify it as a genetic material. Another experiment was done, concluding experiment was done by Hersey and Chase in 1952. Okay, the experiment was based on the process of transduction. You have heard about transduction, the bacterial reproduction. You know, transduction is the process, transfer of genetic material takes place through the bacteriophages. You know it. So here T2 bacteriophage was used, which actually infects the E. coli bacteria. T2 bacteriophage. Hersey and Chase actually demonstrated that only DNA of phage, I mean here phage means PHAGE, phage means bacteriophage. Okay, bacteriophage, you know bacteriophage, the term bacteriophage means eaters of bacteria. That means viruses which are capable of lysating the bacteria, they are called bacteriophages. Okay, they cause the lysis of the bacterial cell wall, they cause bacteriophages, eaters of bacteria. So this experiment demonstrated that only DNA of the phage enters the bacterial cell and not the capsid protein. Okay, only the DNA of the bacteria phage enters the bacterial cell and not the capsid protein. You know what is capsid protein? As far as virus structure is concerned, virus is made of bacteriophage is what? Bacteriophage is a virus. Virus which is capable of infecting bacteria is called bacteriophage. A virus is made up of what? A nucleic acid core or central portion is occupied by nucleic acid and it is surrounded by protein coat, and that protein coat is called capsid, which is made up of single subunits called capsomeres. So remember one thing, there is a capsid protein which envelops this central nucleic acid core. So this experiment proved that the DNA or the only phase enters into the bacterial cell, not the capsid protein. How did he determine it? Actually, for this experiment, he first labeled the DNA and proteins with different radioactive tracers. Okay, DNA and proteins with different radioactive tracers. So for this experiment, he first radio labeled DNA and proteins. Okay, thus let us know how he did that. You know, DNA contains phosphorus. Got it? DNA has phosphorus. Thus the phase of the DNA was labeled with phosphorus P32. How did that labeling was done? By growing the bacteria infected with phages in culture medium containing phosphate. Okay, he grew the bacteria infected with phages in culture medium containing phosphate. Similarly, the protein of the phage contains sulfur. Got it? Thus, the phage protein was labeled with S34 by growing bacteria infected with phages in culture medium containing sulfate, SO4. Got it? In culture medium containing SO4. So you can ask me, sir, from where you knew that the protein is made up of amino acids, methionine and cysteine, which are actually made up of sulfur atom. And that's the reason why phage protein was labeled with S34 by growing bacteria infected with phages in culture medium containing sulfate. Now the phages labeled with sulfur and phosphorus were allowed to infect normal E. coli. Okay. The bacterial cells were then agitated, that is blending was done. Why? To break association between phage and bacterium. Okay, it was done to break association between phage and your bacterium. After that, centrifugation was done to separate the phage and E. coli on the basis of pellet and supernatant based on their weight. Pellet means your sediment that settles down, pellet. So centrifugation was done to separate the phage and E. coli, phage particle and the E. coli bacterium on the basis of their pellet and supernatant on the basis of their weight. Actually, the supernatant contains phage and pellet contains E. coli, that is the sediment contains E. coli. Now, pellet was analyzed first with sulfur labeled phage. There was no radioactivity found in case of sulfur labeled phage. Why? As here protein of phage was labeled and phage was outside as supernatant. You know, when centrifugation was done, it was meant to separate the E. coli and pellet on the basis of the weight. Because of higher weight or heavier weight, your E. coli was present as pellet, that is sediment, whereas the your phage was collected as supernatant. Now supernatant was having phage and pellet was having E. coli. Now when analysis of pellet was done, there was no radioactivity because there was no your phage was only found in supernatant, only your E. coli was present in pellet. Okay, so no radioactivity was found in the pellet in case of sulfur labeled phage, as here protein of phage was labeled and phage was outside a supernatant. This proved that protein did not enter the bacterium. Got it? Now another analysis was done of the pellet in case of phosphorus labeled phage. Radioactivity inside E. coli was found because here this pellet was having only E. coli, and remember that the phosphorus DNA was labeled with phosphorus. As DNA of the phage was labeled, and it proved that the phage DNA entered the bacterial cells and got incorporated into the E. coli. Did you understand? Fact is that when sulfur labeled pellet was analyzed, there was no radioactivity. We know that protein was labeled, radio labeled with sulfate. Got it? So had the proteins been entered into the bacterium, it would have shown here, but it didn't enter. It was present as supernatant outside the pellet. So there was no radioactivity. Now when the pellet with phosphorus labeled phase was analyzed, it was found that radioactivity was there because we actually radio labeled DNA with phosphate. and that DNA of the phage was found out in the E. coli. Got it? So this completely proved that here DNA got transferred, not the protein. This completely proved that DNA is the genetic material. Got it? So with this we conclude this particular video. So from this particular video we studied about, we learnt about what is the characteristics of a genetic material, then what are the various experiments done to prove DNA is the genetic material. First one was done by Griffith, which he only said that it is the transforming principle, not the DNA. He didn't utter the word DNA. He used the term transforming principle, and that transforming principle was called as DNA by your Avery's experiment. And then another experiment was done by Hershey and Chase in 1952. It was based on the process of transduction, whereas the other two experiments were based on the process of transformation. Got it? So we'll meet again in another video. Thank you.